I need to share with you a story that literally kept me awake for days when I discovered it. And mind you, I've researched hundreds of churches around the world, but this one is different. October 31st, 2025, Barcelona. Just a few weeks ago. A church that's been under construction for 143 years finally became the tallest in the world. It's not just about height that I want to chat about. It's about the man who died as a beggar in the streets, recognized by no one, poor, alone, and who today may become a saint. It's about Masonic secrets hidden in sacred stones. It's about prophecies that came true. It's about an obsession that cost literally everything. And the question that won't go away is, why hasn't this church been finished after a century and a half? What's happening inside? When you discover the truth behind the Sagrada Familia, you'll understand that some things aren't meant to be built quickly. Some things are eternal. Before we dive into this story, if you appreciate narratives that make us reflect, real stories that feel like movies, stay here with me. Subscribe to the channel because every week I bring you a different church, a different mystery. And I guarantee you've never seen churches this way. Now, let's go back to Barcelona, 1878, because it all started with a bookseller who had an impossible dream. Imagine yourself in 1878. Barcelona is in full effervescence due to the Industrial Revolution. The city competes with Paris, with London. Everyone wants to build something grand, something that leaves a permanent legacy. And a man named José María Bocabella emerges, a devout Catholic bookseller. Nothing extraordinary, you understand. Just someone who sold books his entire life and who had an idea. Let's say audacious. What if we built a gigantic church dedicated to the Holy Family? But here's the detail that no one mentions. The church would be financed only by donations. No government money, no guaranteed wealthy sponsors. Only the faith that people would contribute. Would you do that? Would you start a project you probably wouldn't live to see completed? Well, Bocabella did. On March 19, 1882, the first stone was laid. The original architect was Francisco de Paula del Villar. He had a traditional Gothic plan, somewhat predictable, let's say. But then something curious happened. Del Villar and Bocabella began to have disagreements. Arguments about design, about costs, about creative control. And in less than a year, Del Villar abandoned the project. And now? Who would take on this seemingly impossible challenge? Enter Antoni Gaudi, 70 years old. Red hair, penetrating blue eyes, and a reputation for being, let's say, eccentric. But let me tell you who this man really was, because the official history doesn't reveal everything. Gaudi was born in 1852 in Reus, near Barcelona. Family of blacksmiths. He was a sickly child, suffered from chronic rheumatism that prevented him from playing with other children. So, you know what he did? He observed. Hours and hours immersed in nature. Studying how trees grew, how shells formed perfect spirals, how light transformed throughout the day. And he had a revelation. Nature has no straight lines. So why should architecture have them? Think about that for a moment. All the architecture of the time was based on symmetry, straight lines, geometric perfection. And this young man was saying, and it's all wrong. In 1883, at only 31 years old, Gaudi was invited to take over the Sagrada Familia. And he did something no architect would do today. He accepted a project he knew he would never see completed. But here's the twist. They say Gaudi had a vision. A mystical experience where he saw the church complete. Some believe it was a dream, others that it was a religious apparition. Gaudi never confirmed or denied it. He only said, "My client is not in a hurry." He was talking about God. In the early years, Gaudi worked on other projects, Casa Batlló, Guell, but from 1880 on, he abandoned everything. Literally everything. He moved to live at the construction site, slept in a tiny room, ate only bread and oranges, wore old, patched clothes. People thought he had gone mad. His own family distanced themselves. Friends died, and he barely attended the funerals. Why? Because he said this church will last 1,000 years. It needs to be perfect. Was Gaudi a visionary genius? Or an obsessed man who sacrificed his life for stones? Hold on to that question, because the answer will surprise you. Now let's get to what really matters. The secrets hidden in the Sagrada Familia. And when I discovered this, I was absolutely astonished. Observe. On the Passion Facade, there's a magic square. A square of numbers where, no matter how you add them up, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, it always results in 33. 33. The age of Christ when he was crucified. But ... 33 is also the highest degree of Freemasonry. Coincidence? There are historians who suggest that Gaudi was a member of a secret Masonic lodge in Barcelona. Why? Because Freemasonry at that time was deeply interested in sacred architecture, divine geometry, golden ratio. Gaudi was never officially a member of any lodge. However, he maintained close connections with people who were... And that magic square? It wasn't in the original plans. It was added later by sculptors who worked with Gaudi. So, did he leave a message? Or are we seeing patterns where none exist? This will give you chills. In 1915, a year after abandoning all other projects, Gaudi was talking with an assistant and said, "I will die before seeing this church finished, but don't worry. Someone will continue." So far, nothing extraordinary. He was already elderly, it made sense. But he also said something more disturbing. "My death will be public. Everyone will see. And it will be necessary." Necessary? What kind of statement is that? 11 years later, he died run over by a tram in the middle of the street in front of hundreds of people. A public death. Exactly as he had predicted. Did he predict his own death? Or was it just a macabre coincidence? Here's something that 99% of people don't know. Gaudi is immortalized in the church itself. On the Nativity Facade, he appears as Saint Joseph, the protective father. On the Passion Facade, he's sculpted as Saint John, the only apostle who didn't abandon Jesus on the cross. It was his way of saying, "I will never abandon this church, not even in death," and this is deeply moving when you consider that he is buried in the crypt of this same church to this day. This is truly extraordinary. The stained glass windows of the Sagrada Familia aren't mere decoration. They're a spiritual clock. In the morning from the east side, cool colors enter, blue, green, and purple. They represent birth, baptism, hope. In the afternoon, from the west side, warm colors enter, red, orange, and yellow. They represent passion, sacrifice, resurrection. But there's more at night when the external lights turn on. The entire church turns golden, as if wrapped in celestial flames. Gaudi did this purposefully. He wanted each hour of the day to completely transform the spiritual experience. Because for him, God wasn't static. God was movement, light, constant transformation. This isn't architecture. This is something transcendent. And when I say every, I mean every structure of the church is based on one measurement. 7.5 meters. Why? In Christian and Jewish numerology, 7 equals divine perfection. Good 8 equals resurrection, but also infinity, sometimes associated with evil 7.5, right in the middle, above both. Gaudi was declaring, this church transcends good and evil. It is the bridge between the human and the divine. The Tower of Jesus Christ will be exactly 172.5 meters when completed. Why such a specific number? Because it's exactly 1 meter below Montjuic, the highest mountain in Barcelona. Gaudi refused to build something higher than God's creation. He said, man cannot surpass what God has created. But there's an alternative theory. Some believe that 172 is a code. 17 plus 2 equals 10, and 10 represents the 10 Commandments. Coincidence, or another layer of intentional symbolism? This hasn't been confirmed, but many people in Barcelona believe it. They say there's a secret room in the crypt. A room whose access only 3 people in the world know. And in that room, the original plans of Gaudi that survived the Civil War fire. Why hide them? Because according to legend, the plans show that the church has a second purpose. Not just religious, but astronomical. The theory suggests that the Sagrada Familia is a disguised solar observatory, that certain towers align perfectly with specific constellations, that the church is a map of the cosmos. True? Probably not, but no one has definitively proven it isn't. And before you ask, but why would Gaudi do all this? Hold that question. And this is where everything starts to make sense. Now we arrive at the part that, honestly, left me deeply moved when I discovered it. 1914, Gaudi is 62 years old. He's just lost his niece Rosa, the last family he had. She died young from fever. Shortly after, his best friend and greatest patron, Guell, also passes away. And Gaudi simply abandons everything that isn't the Sagrada Familia. He stops accepting projects, stops socializing, stops taking care of himself. You know that person who completely isolates themselves after a tragedy? That was exactly it, only more intense. Gaudi begins wearing old, worn clothes. Doesn't shave properly, doesn't cut his hair. Donates all the money he has to the church. People on the streets begin to confuse him with a beggar. And him? He doesn't care in the slightest. He declares, "To draw closer to God, I must distance myself from the world." But here's the detail that deeply impacted me. Gaudi was at peace. He didn't see himself as a victim. He believed he was living in the purest way possible. He went to Mass every day, confessed every day, ate only what was necessary to survive, and dedicated every second to the church. June 1926. Gaudi is 33 years old. He knows he won't live much longer. His assistants say he seemed serene, as if awaiting something. June 7th, 1926. Monday, late afternoon. Gaudi leaves the construction site and walks toward the church of Sant Felip Neri, where he confessed daily. Same route as always. He crosses Gran Via de les Corts Catalans, one of Barcelona's busiest avenues. And now pay attention to what I'm about to reveal. Witnesses stated that Gaudi seemed distracted, as if looking at the sky. Some said he was smiling. A tram was coming from the right. Gaudi noticed and stepped back. But he didn't see the second tram coming from the left. Dramatic pause. The impact was brutal. He fell to the ground, bleeding from the head, unconscious. And here comes the most tragic part. People passed by him, looked, and kept going. Why? Because they thought he was just another drunk beggar on the streets. Taxi drivers refused to take him to the hospital. He's too dirty. He won't pay. No one recognized him, the most famous architect in Barcelona. The man who transformed the city. And there he was, dying on the ground, being ignored. Finally, a policeman had compassion and took him to Hospital de la Santa Creu, the hospital for the poor. He received basic care, a simple bed, no special treatment. Only the next day, when the chaplain of the Sagrada Familia was visiting patients, did he recognize Gaudi. Immediately, they wanted to transfer him to a private hospital. Better doctors, better care. But Gaudi refused. He said, "My place is among the poor." And here I need to pause so you can understand the weight of that statement. A man who dedicated his entire life to building God's house, who became poor by choice, who died as the poor die, ignored, unrecognized in the streets, and he accepted it, not with anger, not with sadness, but with serenity. June 10th, 1926. 5 p.m. Antoni Gaudi dies at Hospital de la Santa Creu. He was 73 years old. His last words? No one knows for certain. But a nurse stated that he murmured something about the church needs more light. Even in death, he was thinking about the Sagrada Familia. Here's the extraordinary twist. When the news spread, all of Barcelona stopped. More than 100,000 people took to the streets. From the hospital to the Sagrada Familia, 5 kilometers, it was an uninterrupted human procession. The man who died alone, ignored, poor, was buried like a king, and the location of his burial, in the crypt of the Sagrada Familia, the church he never finished, the church that was only 15 to 25% complete. You think the story ends there, wouldn't you? A tragic but poetic ending. But no, because the Sagrada Familia carries a curse. And I'm not exaggerating. 10 years after Gaudi's death, the Spanish Civil War breaks out. Anarchists invade the Sagrada Familia. Why? Because they saw the church as a symbol of religious oppression. They broke the statues, destroyed the stained glass. And worst of all, they set fire to the workshop, Gaudi's plaster models, destroyed. The original plans, burned. Decades of work, reduced to ashes. The architects who came after had to become true archaeological detectives, piecing together burned fragments, interpreting old photographs, trying to decipher what Gaudi had planned. To this day, no one knows if they're building exactly what Gaudi wanted. It's an approximation, a careful interpretation. The Spanish government decides to build a high-speed train tunnel. Guess where? Directly beneath the Sagrada Familia. The church's engineers panicked. They declared this will destabilize the foundation. The church could collapse. The government guaranteed everything is under control. Trust us. Construction began. And for months, people working in the church claimed they could feel the vibrations. Cracks began to appear. There were emergency meetings, protests, even the Vatican spoke out, but the tunnel was built, and miraculously, the church survived. No significant structural damage. Luck, precise engineering, or divine protection? August 2017. Barcelona was targeted by terrorist attacks. A van attack on Las Ramblas killed 16 people. But here's what almost happened, and few people know. Later investigations discovered that the original plan was far more devastating. They planned to fill a van with gas cylinders and detonate it inside the Sagrada Familia during peak visiting hours. Thousands of tourists, children, families. The attack only didn't occur because there was an accidental explosion at the terrorists' house the day before. The explosion killed one of them and alerted the police. If not for that accident, the Sagrada Familia could have been destroyed. Coincidence or something greater? There's an urban legend in Barcelona that church workers share. They say that occasionally when working alone at night, they feel a presence, not threatening, but watching. Some have reported seeing a figure in old clothes, gray hair, observing the work. When they look again, it disappears. They believe it's Gaudi, that his spirit never left the church. Superstition? Probably. But so many workers have reported this that it's become part of local folklore. Now, let's go to the present, to the historic moment that happened just a few weeks ago. October 31st, 2025. After 143 years, nearly a century and a half, the Tower of Jesus Christ began receiving its final cross. And when it was installed, the Sagrada Familia reached 162.91 meters in height. Officially, at that moment, it became the tallest church in the world. It surpassed the Ulmünster in Germany, which had held the record for 135 years. But here's the most impressive detail. 2026 marks exactly 100 years since Gaudi's death. And the prediction is that the tower will be completed in 2026, reaching the 172 meters he always planned. 100 years, exactly. Coincidence? Or was his prophecy correct from the beginning? And there's more. In 2010, Pope Benedict XVI consecrated the Sagrada Familia as a basilica. In 2025, Pope Francis declared Antoni Gaudi as venerable, a fundamental step in the canonization process. The beggar who died alone in the streets may soon become Saint Antoni Gaudi, and when that happens, the Sagrada Familia won't just be the tallest church in the world. It will be the only church in the world built by a saint. And so after all this, after knowing the complete story, let us return to that question I asked at the beginning. Was Gaudi a visionary genius or an obsessed man who sacrificed everything? The truth? He was both. And perhaps that's exactly what makes this story so profoundly human. He sacrificed everything: family, fortune, comfort, recognition. He died poor, alone, unrecognized. But he left something that will last 1,000 years. Something that millions of people visit annually. Something that transcends religion, culture, time. The Sagrada Familia isn't just architecture. It's proof that one man with an impossible vision can transform the world. And perhaps the greatest mystery isn't the secret codes or the prophecies. It's how a man managed to put his soul into stones. How he managed to make you feel the divine presence through light and geometry. This isn't construction, this is spiritual alchemy. And if you've stayed until here, thank you sincerely. I hope every minute was worth it. If this story touched you as it touched me, leave your like. Subscribe to the channel because next week I'll bring another church with even more intriguing secrets. And share in the comments, do you believe Gaudi predicted his own death? Do you believe the Sagrada Familia has divine protection? Until the next story, until the next church, God bless.